In this video, I will be attempting to survive 100 days in a medieval forest in hardcore Minecraft. This means I'll have to survive intense weather, dangerous wildlife, and constant attacks from these royal guards. All while I discover this world's secrets and assemble huge armies. With all that being said, enjoy the video. I awoke on day 1 and began to take in my surroundings. I was hoping to find a structure or something to help me get a head start, but unfortunately there wasn't anything in sight. As I took my first few steps in this new world, I saw some sort of wild pig. As much as I'm gonna need food to survive here, I didn't feel like I could take this guy on just yet, so I continued forward, keeping my distance from him. I decided that for now, all I really could do was gather some wood and make some simple tools. I crafted myself a wooden pickaxe, grabbed some stone, and immediately upgraded to a stone one. Well, that was fancy. Oh, you know what? I should probably make a weapon too. Never know what could happen here. After making myself my first weapon, I began wandering around in hopes of finding food, water, shelter, or really anything. I ended up at this little prairie, but realized I was kind of being surrounded by these guys and didn't want anything to do with them. Yeah, I don't want to be anywhere near you guys. I'm gonna stay over this way. Just when I thought I was safe, I looked up in the sky and realized there was rain coming down. That's not good. I wasn't sure if that was because there was a storm coming soon, but I was not sticking around to find out. Yeah, let's get out of here. Just to be on the safe side, I gathered a few more cobblestone to make a quick shelter to keep me safe and dry. As I continued through the forest, I ran into this little anteater. Oh, hello. You gonna give me any food? I still didn't have any food, so I decided to take my chances. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, that didn't work out. Now that I was down on some health, I decided it was important to get a canteen and find a water source. Because if I didn't, knowing me, I wouldn't survive very much longer. So I said hello to this cow, who didn't drop any leather. Found this pig, which restored my hunger at least. And continued forward to try and find some more cows to give me the leather I needed to make the canteen. I found some more rather quickly, but I also discovered this little ant. Curiosity got the best of me and I killed it, hoping it would drop something valuable. And nothing. I continued gathering leather, and that's when I discovered this little river. Fresh mountain water was exactly what I needed to survive. But that's when my luck stopped. Night was coming, and so was the harsh weather of this forest. I ran around for a second to see if maybe I could somehow sleep the night away, but ultimately did what anyone would do. Dug straight down. I mined down and found myself my first couple pieces of iron. I'll definitely need that in the future. Tried to keep myself busy and continued forward, finding some coal and eventually falling into this cave. Ouch. I gathered a couple more pieces of iron and coal, but it didn't really look like there was too much for me down here. I knew I didn't want to miss any daylight, so I dug a tunnel upwards and waited. I went ahead and mined myself out and into day 2. I was starting to get tired and I knew pulling another all-nighter wouldn't be in my best interests, so my goal for today was to get a bed. I walked around for a couple minutes and found the river again. I decided to take a quick bath and just kind of explore the river a little bit. I saw there was some squid and then I noticed some salmon. But that's when I noticed this guy. There were armies and armies of them around this world, I'm sure, but right now was not the time to find out how tough they were. I turned around and walked away and made myself a canteen to heal up the hearts that I'd lost on day one. Unfortunately, this wasn't clean water, so it gave me the thirst effect, but at least it was better than nothing. I knew at some point I'd have to purify my water, but for now, raw pork and dirty water it is. Instead of trying to go around him on land, I decided to gather a couple pieces of wood, make a boat, and sail past him. I traveled further downriver and came across what must have been his boat. I was sure there was a reason he was here. So I looked around and I was right. I found some sort of camp. However, I was terrified to go in, so I just waited deep in the trees until I felt safe. I didn't see any movement, so I headed in and began looting the place. I found a bow and a couple of arrows and a few steak. And in this building I found a horse. I figured he needed the apples and carrots more than I did, so I left him. Unfortunately, I didn't have a saddle. But hey, I look good on a horse. Alright, enough of that. In the final room, that's when I found a villager, and with his dying breath, he told me to take the book. Years ago, this land was captured by Lord Arpheus and his army. The villagers who lived here were forced out of their homes. Those who weren't captured took refuge in small campsites throughout the forest. Please, help reclaim what was stolen and help save this land from the evil who now rule. This land used to be peaceful, and ever since Lord Arpheus and his army conquered it, the villagers here have suffered. I knew I had to follow this quest and restore this nation. However, I also knew this would take time. I still had no armor, very weak weapons, and no sustainable food source. I said my goodbyes and left the campsite. I spent the rest of the day searching for sheep so I could make a bed. By nightfall, though, I only found one. And after smelting my iron and making some shears, he only dropped 2 wool, and I needed 3 to make a bed. So let's just say this sheep and I had some quality time in this 4x4 makeshift shelter. Day 3 finally came along, and since this sheep didn't want to regrow their wool, I decided to try and kill it, hoping that it would drop some. But I guess it doesn't work that way. Anyways, moving on, I continued traveling for the rest of the day and finally found another sheep, but it was surrounded by these wild hogs. I knew I had to be careful because I could feel they were going to try to kill me. I saw their backs were turned and made a break for it. After obtaining the wool I needed, I ran away as fast as I could. But that's when I ran into, almost literally, the first soldier. I still had the adrenaline rush after what just happened, so I decided to fight. And he didn't even drop anything. I knew from this point on I had to be more careful. I didn't want to die on my 3rd day. The rest of the day was spent wandering through the forest looking for water to regain my health I had lost in that battle. As night was falling, I ended up climbing this mountain to see if maybe in the morning I could see a water source. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. It still took some searching. Finally though, I made it to this beach. I knew it'd probably be salty water and wouldn't be very good for me, but at least I'd be able to regain some health. I knew it. By the end of day 4, I still hadn't found anything, so I just went to bed in this tree. Day 5 is when everything interesting started to happen. After cooking some food, I immediately came across this boat. I didn't see any soldiers around it, so I hopped in and began sailing away. It didn't take me long to find some sort of village. So I parked the boat at the edge of the water and snuck around to check it out. I kept my distance and climbed a nearby tree. I hopped around until I could get a good view of what was going on. And that's when I saw the natives of this land trapped in the town square. It didn't take me long to spot these guards surrounding the village as well. In fact, one came pretty close to me. As I double checked there weren't any more around, I decided to engage. I started off pretty good, being able to get a couple good hits in without him being able to touch me. But once he hit me and dealt half my health with one hit, I knew this was not going to happen without armor and better weapons. At this point though, enough was enough. Wandering around for days on end wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I decided that retaking this village was my first quest. I went far enough to where I felt like the soldiers couldn't easily find me, and started to set up camp. I decided to build a little home here next to the water, and the first thing I needed was wood. So I went and chopped up a bunch. I figured that was probably enough for now and started heading back. When I got back to the little lake I was planning on building my home, I remembered I needed to grab some more stone to make some more tools. However, as I went to mine some, that's when our first tornado hit. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I had plans to build a storm shelter, but just haven't gotten there yet. There was hail flying everywhere, so I took some cover in these trees. But ultimately decided it was best for me to just dig down and wait for the storm to pass. I took a peek every so often because I was curious, but I was not brave enough to go out there. I got up the next morning to see some slight winds, but the tornado seemed to be gone. So that meant we were safe from the weather. Well, at least for now. I continued my plan of grabbing some stone before we were rudely interrupted by the tornado, and then I started to mark out exactly where I wanted this thing to be. After only a couple minutes though, I realized that I wanted my house to be at least somewhat center to the lake. And apparently this guy agreed. Although he didn't make much noise, I knew what he was trying to say. So I tore down what I had done and began to build on the other side. And I could tell that he agreed by the look he gave me. What are you looking at? Anyways, I knew that since I was building it here, I was going to have to take down a couple trees, but that was okay because I kind of wanted the leaves anyways for decoration later. So I went ahead and climbed this tree and started working on it. It took me all the way into the next day to finish clearing all these trees out of the way. Which, by the time that was all done, we were ready to start building. If I could think of any good ideas, that is. Trust me, I am not a very good builder, so I started constructing the shell to look something like a Lego cabin build that I just found on the internet. Good thing was, this was just me surviving. It didn't necessarily have to be anything good, right? Anyways, I finished that up, and then I realized I wanted some cobblestone to break up all the wood. I gathered what I thought was enough, trying to avoid caves as I found them. And apparently there was a huge one beneath me. I ran back home and started on the roof, but I honestly had no idea what I was doing, so it took me way longer than it should have. In fact, I had to trim down this tree just a little bit just to give myself a little more room. Over the next couple days, this struggle continued. I still wasn't really sure how to do this. I ended up just completely tearing down this tree because it got in the way more than once. In fact, I had to go mining again because I didn't get anywhere near enough cobblestone the first time. While I was mining though, I remembered I could make a hammer. And that made everything so much faster. In fact, it even helped me find some coal. Finally, the roof was done. I added some spaces for windows and also built this little loft to put my bed in. Figured that'd be kind of cozy. On the morning of day 12 though, I woke up to a sound I did not want to hear. I immediately ran and tried to get up on the roof, but I stumbled and he was right there, so I got some distance on him and took him out with my bow. Luckily, I've had my fair share of experiences with these guys in previous videos, so I was able to take him out pretty easily. Thankfully, they didn't even hit me once. I then went around and changed up some of the cobblestone for a couple different blocks to make it look just a little nicer. I then said hello to this fish, who came to the shore, I'm sure wanting food, but I was hungry too. Thank you. I added some finishing touches to the exterior, and then the only thing left was the floor. After clearing out all the dirt and grass, I decided that diorite would be kind of cool for the floor, so I went to the nearby cave and started mining some. Luckily, again, with this hammer, it made light work. I put in the floor, added some lighting, and we're done. At least for now. I honestly don't think it really turned out that bad. Again, I'm just surviving. Now that I had my little hut built, my new goal was to find a solid food source. We were 15 days into this challenge, and I kind of just been eating the scraps that I've been finding. Which wouldn't work forever, because in this mod pack, I had a diet that I needed to stick to, and up to this point, I've pretty much just eaten protein. So I began with the easiest. Grains. I decided to build a little farm on the side of the lake, hoping it would give me a ton of wheat. I had some bones from chests I had found, so I made good use of that. All in all, after using all those bones, I had a decent little farm going, although it was going to have to be a lot bigger than this if I wanted to stay healthy. But for now, it'll have to do. I made my first piece of bread and ate it. And I also grabbed the apples from the chest because fruits were also on the list. Luckily, those were easier to come by. The one I was a little more worried about was vegetables. I remember there were some carrots back in the campsite in the beginning, so I decided to try to travel back there and see if I could grab a couple. But I couldn't forget my bed because knowing me, I'd get lost. I thought all I needed to do was go over this mountain and go down into the forest a little, but it was obviously a lot further than I'd planned. I killed this random fox or coyote or whatever this thing is. And then it was getting dark, so I climbed a tree and spent the night. I started my morning by almost getting sprayed by a skunk. Glad I avoided that. And then I ran into the river I recognized, so followed that along and finally got to the campsite. I thought I heard something, but apparently I was just crazy. And then I grabbed these carrots and the apples. Well, I had second thoughts and left a couple of the carrots, because I really only needed one or two to start a farm. Then I fed the apples to the horse, since I could get some more later anyways. I bid farewell to the horse because, again, I still didn't have a saddle, and headed back out. At this point, I reassessed where I was at with my diet, and I had a little bit of everything. Well, everything but sugar, which I suppose would either come from honey in the beehives or sugarcane. Neither of which I remember seeing yet, so I continued on my journey. I continued along this river for a while, hoping I would find some sugarcane, but didn't have any luck. I did find this bridge, but there was nothing but these little coyotes around it, so I decided to just avoid them for now. In fact, it led me all the way to the edge of this huge lake. Wasn't really sure what was on the other side of it, but for now, my job was still to find sugarcane, and I didn't see any over there either. I did decide to take a little dip inside the lake, just in case there was anything interesting, but I didn't find anything. So I spent the night on the beach and then continued my journey in the morning. I ran across another one of these ants, punched it, because I was curious if it would get mad at me, and it did. So then, of course, I killed it, which was interesting because only a couple minutes later, another heart appeared on my bar, and I'm not really sure why, but if killing these ants gave me more health, it would be worth it to hunt them down. Finally, after what seemed like forever, I found some sugarcane. I couldn't quite eat anything with sugar yet, but at least I had the resource to begin a farm. I began heading home, and that's when it started raining again. If the weather didn't let up soon, this was going to be a long challenge. I then passed by the village, knowing I wasn't anywhere near ready to take that on. And finally made it home. At this point, I was pretty much completely out of food. Well, at least other than the stuff that was meant for farming. So I cooked up some mutton and ate it here on the dock. To finish out day 17, I planted the carrots I had and went to bed. I woke up on day 18 to, guess what? More rain. There was nothing I could do about it, so I grabbed the sugarcane I collected the day before and went and planted it on the other side of the lake. As the rain died down, I checked the recipes for what would give me sugar, and it seemed like cake, cookies, and honey were my only options, none of which I was even close to getting. I hadn't seen a beehive anywhere, and since this was a forest, I couldn't imagine I'd find cocoa beans that were typically found in jungle biomes anytime soon. So cake was my best bet, but it was expensive. I needed 3 milk, 2 sugar, 1 egg, and 3 wheat. I had the wheat and sugar covered, and since it was only a matter of time until I caught and breeded some livestock, I figured no better time to start than now. I built a pen for the chickens and also one for the cows to give me milk and the eggs I needed. I had no idea how long it would take to get some actual animals here though. But I was about to find out, because on the next day I decided to start looking for some. Before going too far, I decided to try and get some extra seeds. I traveled through a previously uncharted part of this forest and actually found some ruins. You can never be too careful, especially without any armor, so I took my time in scouting out the area before moving in. I didn't see any immediate threats, so I took my time to loot this barrel, which only had building blocks, but hey, I'll take it. I looked around further and still couldn't really see anything, so I thought I was good. In fact, I managed to loot a couple more chests before running into a knight. I was feeling a little cocky, but still didn't want to take any chances, so did my best to take him down from afar. And they take a lot of hits. Can't imagine what an army of them would look like. Luckily though, with my bow and sword, we managed to handle him pretty easily. In fact, he dropped me some boots, which I put on, and finally I had some armor, even if it was just boots. I searched the rest of the structure cautiously as I knew there was probably more knights around. But I didn't see any. Ooh, a diamond pick. I climbed up to the top just to see if I missed a barrel, and I did, so I quickly looted it. Had some arrows and a crossbow, which will come in handy later. But that brought me back to my original objective, finding some animals. I was in need of some immediate food though, so I saw this wild hog and decided to try out my new crossbow. It was nice. I did remember though that I got some flint and steel from the structure, so I decided to let the hog burn in order to cook the food. For some reason he dropped a snowball, but I only needed the pork. It took me all the way until nightfall to find some cows. Luckily, I had some cobwebs from the structure, so I mined those up and made a bed for the night. When I woke up, they were ready to go. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but this was going to be really tedious. I had to walk slow enough to where all of them could keep up and not forget I was there, which, as you can tell, failed instantly. Whatever, at least I've got a couple following me. Honestly, not much happened the rest of the day. I got the cows home, dropped off the loot I found in the ruins, and did a little farming. Well, I tried to at least. The next day, I just immediately started looking for some chickens. Trust me when I tell you, I searched far and wide to find these chickens. In fact, I even came to the edge of this huge cliff that led to the ocean. I was tempted to see if I could make the jump, but I've still got a mission here. I came across some more cows, which I was not about to lead home. And a couple minutes after that, I finally found what I was looking for. I began the long trek home, hoping the chicken would follow me the entire way. Luckily, these lay eggs, so I really only need one of them to get started. In fact, while we were walking home, the chicken laid its first egg. I'll keep that for later. Finally, the chicken was home and my sanity restored. I decided I'd try my luck to get another chicken, so I threw the egg and nothing happened. I definitely should have kept that to make a cake later, but I guess I'll just have to wait. I planted the rest of the seeds that I had and called it a day. On day 22, I woke up and gave my 2 wheat to the cows. And then checked on my crops. They still weren't growing, and that was a big problem. So I decided to do something pretty risky. I headed back over to the village we saw earlier to see if maybe, just maybe, I could stand a chance. I decided it was probably best if I just tried to take on one house at a time. So I came over to the entrance and invited myself in. And there was more of them. I frantically started shooting my bow and tried to keep them at a distance. The crossbow did seem to help. In fact, they were no match for me. That's when I started to get a little overconfident. I checked the chests in the bottom floor and got some extra iron, which would be great for making some more armor later. I then peeked on the next floor and got really scared. Rightfully so, because this guy was about to destroy me. And after just a couple hits with this crossbow, I was down half my health. I tried to recover by drinking some water, but in the end, my gear was no match for these guys. I ran home on only 5 hearts, but I wasn't completely empty-handed. I was able to loot that chest, which gave me enough iron to make a full set of armor. I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little scared, though. These guys were tough. I was also, once again, out of food, so I was really in no shape for battle. I came home, cooked up some fish, and decided to start smelting the rest of this iron to make some more armor. In the meantime, I decided to fish. In fact, it was so peaceful that I just fished the rest of the day. Well, I also needed the food. I checked on my animals, and the chicken had laid another egg. Again, I should have kept it for a cake, but I didn't, and again, no luck. After that, I went back inside and created the rest of my armor. I also made myself a new sword and a shield. Yeah, I sure felt ready now. I headed back to the village because why not? I had some food, I had some upgraded armor and weapons. I felt like $1,000,000. As soon as I got back, the battle continued. In fact, it somehow was hitting me through my shield, which was not ideal. So I decided to kind of make a little tunnel, just kill him through that. That was the easiest way. The battle continued, but I was a lot more careful this time. They do a lot of damage, even with full armor. Finally though, I cleared out this whole building, which allowed me to collect a little bit more resources. I don't really know what I was expecting, but I went upstairs and checked the chests and was pretty disappointed. Just some redstone. Although, who knows, that might come in handy later. Oh, just kidding, I actually found these books as well, which, yeah, that's gonna be really nice. But this house was done, so I moved on to the next one. I fought all the way until the sun was down. And then just fell asleep in this weird little hallway. As I continued the following day, I heard some really weird noises. Yeah, I wasn't really sure what that was, but I did not want to find out. I continued fighting my way through until the bottom section was cleared. I realized though when I went up the stairs, there didn't seem to be any more. So I took a couple minutes and looted some of the barrels. But then I saw some through the door, so quickly took those out in the final room. Again, I'm keeping my distance from these guys because they do some serious damage. And they also take a lot of hits. I mean, look at this. I'm critting these guys out. This is ridiculous. Finally, I was done. Well, at least in this building. I was quickly running out of food, so I grabbed the only edible thing in the barrels, rotten flesh. It'll have to do for now. After double checking I didn't miss anything, I moved on to the next house, hoping that there'd be some more food or more useful materials in this one. I'm not going to bore you guys with the details of this never-ending battle, but one of these guys did drop a spear, which I picked up and used. These crossbow guys, though, were on a whole new level. They were some serious crack shots and did some major damage. In fact, this one got me really low. Twice. While I was looting this house, I realized I had picked up an item I'd never seen before. You right-click it, and it upgrades your weapon. Stupidly, I used 2 of them, upgrading it to sharpness 2, when the spear was just going to break later. So I decided to keep the rest of them for when I had a diamond sword to apply it to. I'll be honest, so far the loot here was pretty underwhelming, but what can you expect from a village? Right as I say that, I found something pretty remarkable in the next house. Chest full of food, cake, and even an enchantment table. This thing will play a huge role in my future success for sure. While I was here, I grabbed some more bookshelves because I figured the villagers wouldn't mind. In fact, I got so full of stuff that I had to place a couple chests in between the houses to store some of the loot I was getting. I didn't want to lose any of this stuff. The next little bit went by pretty quick. I was eating some cake, fighting some more knights, and trying to stay alive. I was pretty amazed at how many swords I was having to make. These guys took a lot of hits. I was definitely going to need some enchanting if I was going to run into more of these guys in the future. But I was nearing the end. This was one of the last houses I had to cover. I checked the chest to find some more valuables. And then maybe got a little too confident with these guys. Remember what I was telling you about the crossbows? Yeesh. I was so close to freeing the villagers. This was the final building I had to take down. And call me a chicken, but I did it the same way as always. Finally, after what seemed like hours, I had the bottom pretty much clear. It was just this last guy. Right after I killed him, though, I ran into a heap of trouble. One more hit and I would have died. No more surprises. And it certainly had its rewards. A diamond axe, a couple diamonds. I'll take it. I wasn't quite done yet, though. I still had one more to take down. Luckily, he was pretty easy. He did drop his mace, which is cool. I celebrated with eating a little bit of cake and looting the rest of the barrels. Thankfully, there was more food here because I was in desperate need of more. It was finally time to free the villagers. I knew this was probably not the only village that was captured, but at least it's a start. After breaking down the rest of the cage, I introduced myself to a couple of them. Some of them could be hired for emeralds. I assumed that meant I could build some sort of army, which would be extremely helpful against these guys. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough emeralds. But if I was going to stand a chance against the rest of the evil army, I was going to need an army of my own. I spent the next couple days going back and forth from my house and the village, moving all the loot that I had gathered throughout the buildings. It even started snowing. I assumed that meant the winter was coming, which wasn't necessarily a good thing because I think that was going to slow my crop growth, which wouldn't help with the food situation. But before you knew it, I was home and so was all the loot. I remembered to take a look at my diet and I was struggling with the fruits and grains. I knew I was going to have to do something about that. As I came outside on the morning of day 31, I noticed my turtle friend had come to see me again. He wasn't really doing anything but staring, so I stared back. There was also ice on the edge of the lake, which kind of scared me, and my chickens were somehow gone. I have no idea how that happened, but luckily, from the village I got some eggs. So a couple eggs later and bam, got a new chicken. Now I know some of you aren't going to agree with what I'm about to do, but remember, this is survival. It's about life or death. I needed eggs and there was no better way to get them than to trap a chicken underneath a hopper. I know it's not the most humane thing, but I hope you understand. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Mother Nature must not have appreciated what I just did, because as soon as it was completed, a huge snowstorm came my way. The only thing I could think of doing other than just waiting it out was I decided to craft some lanterns. Hopefully that would keep the animals at least kind of warm. After that, there was nothing I could really do but wait out the storm myself. Thankfully, by the next day it was gone. All that was left was just some piles of snow and ice. At this point, I decided to go caving. I remembered I had seen a couple emeralds when I was mining some cobblestone for my house earlier, so I started there. And then I went deeper and found some iron, coal, and actually a bunch of diamonds. In total, I was coming home with 20 diamonds, 14 emeralds, and some iron and coal. Not bad. I checked on my livestock really quick, hoping they didn't fly away in the storm. And then I gathered a couple seeds to feed to my captured chicken so he'd grow faster. 'Cause that's how that works. I then took a quick look at my diet, only to realize that I had a little bit of everything, which is perfect. But I also decided to keep several different kinds of food on me in order to accomplish that. I did not want to get sick. At this point, I knew I didn't have anywhere near enough emeralds to hire a whole army, but I could start learning the mechanics by hiring one. So that's what I did. I picked one that looked strong and ready to fight, and hired him. I then figured out that right-clicking him gave him different commands. So I told him to follow me, and I took him home. And let me tell you, he followed me way better than the cows and chickens did. I didn't even have to slow down for him. As soon as I got him back to my base, I decided I should give him some armor and an upgraded weapon. If he was going to help defend me and fight with me, I wanted him to be ready. I also realized in order to keep him from dying, I needed to feed him too. I guess we all need to eat. But that means I can only have as big enough army as I could feed. Which meant, again, food was going to be a problem. For now, I just had him hold his position outside of my house while I went to bed. Oh, I forgot to mention, I did give him a bed, but he obviously didn't get any sleep. I completed my morning chores and then decided that over the next couple days I would work on a house for this guy so he had somewhere to stay warm and comfortable throughout the night. I also really wanted to hire more, but needed a little more organization before I did. I wanted to make his living quarters out of spruce wood and various types of stone. I got some spruce saplings from looting the village earlier, so I went to start chopping down some trees. And that first one was huge. Thankfully, I had the diamond axe that I got from looting the village, and it saved me a ton of time here. Before I knew it, I had 3 or 4 stacks of spruce wood just waiting to be used. I wanted to put the army living quarters over here on this side, but first I needed to terraform. I started with the trees, and once those were taken care of, I leveled out the ground. Finally, it was ready to start building. I had a general idea of what I wanted, but again, I'm not much of a builder, so I just did the best I could and started with these pillars. I then connected them all at the top. And yeah, so far so good. I didn't really know where to go from here, but I figured the floor would probably be easiest, so I started working on that. Of course, just to my luck, another snowstorm hit, although this one looked a lot more intense than the last. In fact, seeing all the heavy winds, I figured I knew where this was going. That's right, another tornado. I ran and got my recruit and headed down to the shelter. By the next morning, though, it was gone, thankfully. I checked on my animals, and they still seemed alright, so I think we were good. In fact, there might not have been a tornado after all. I went ahead and finished up the floor, and added the ceiling. And then I decided to go on a little adventure to find the blocks I wanted. I remembered there was mossy stone and cobble at the ruins I had found earlier, so I headed back over that way and decided to gather up all the blocks I could. I then used those blocks on the walls. And it was really starting to come together. I added a little detail with some stairs because I thought that might look nice. And bam, wall's done. Well, after I added some windows. At this point, my crops were finally starting to grow, so I harvested a couple and replanted where needed. I then took the extra seeds and fed them to the chickens, and the wheat to the cows. My attention turned back to my recruit's living quarters as I continued to build it. Also, at some point here, I gained another heart. I'm not really sure where that came from, but yeah. Let me tell you, this part took forever. I built up the wood pillars on the back side because I wanted to create kind of a lookout. It did make me have to cut down more trees, though. I must say, it was looking pretty nice so far. I finished up the top, adding in a floor and guardrails. I don't know what they're called, but I wanted little hat things on top of these small pillars made out of stone slabs, so I worked on getting the materials for that. When I made it back to my base, I decided now was the perfect time to make my first cake. I set it on the ground and enjoyed it. Didn't quite regenerate my sugars as much as I wanted it to, but it was a step in the right direction. I put the finishing touches at the top and then started on the walls on the second floor. I decided to keep with the same gradient as I did with the rest of the building, and honestly, when it was all done, I thought it looked really nice. At this point, I knew I needed a bunch of beds, but I didn't really have any sheep or any good way to get wool, so I decided to head back to the village because I remembered there was a big canopy, and I figured since I saved the village, they probably wouldn't mind if I took some. I collected enough wool for 38 beds, and I figured, at least for now, that was going to be plenty. So I headed back and made it, just in time to sleep. As I woke up the next day, the first thing I did was check my diet. Luckily, it was looking pretty good, but the sugars were still a little low. I decided to switch up my food and try to get some more fruits in, so I held the apples. I then dyed the white wool red and made some beds. I placed as many as I could here, kind of like bunk beds, and then introduced my recruit to his new home. Hopefully we're going to fill this place soon. Although, if we were going to do that, we really needed some more food. I could hardly feed myself and him, let alone a whole group. Although with my farm growing as slow as it wasn't looking good for us. I took what crops I did have and fed them to my animals, the seeds to the chickens, and the wheat to the cows. Today I wanted to explore, but I decided to take my recruit with me. We climbed up the mountain together and actually found a group of his friends. Unfortunately, I still didn't have enough emeralds or food to support these guys. But it was good to know they were here. We got up to the top and traversed through this thick snow. I was hoping to find something once I got to the top, but no luck. There was this huge cliff though. Still no structures, but it was kind of cool. At some point climbing down, I gained another heart. I wasn't sure where these were coming from, but I was definitely thankful for them. I went down to the bank to get a quick drink and noticed this huge whale. Thankfully, he was minding his own business and I would too. As nightfall was coming, I spotted a village out in the distance. We came toward it cautiously, but we could see villagers and knew that they were peaceful. I went through some of their stuff, but didn't really find anything of value. I was gonna spend the night here, but as night came, everybody started taking the beds. I knew there wasn't enough for even all of them, so I left when I felt like I was getting weird looks. In the morning, I went through this house and found some golden carrots and a horse. This horse had a saddle, so you bet I was taking him. I knew I'd be back, so I left my recruit here and headed home. As I dismounted, for whatever reason, the horse decided to hang out with the chickens. I guess he'll be safe in there. At this point, I wanted to build an underground farm. I was hoping that would make the crops grow faster, but I'm embarrassed to say that this was kind of a complete waste of time, and I'll explain why in a second. Also, while we were building the farm, we gained another heart. It was officially day 50. We were halfway through the challenge, and I knew that there was other villages and structures that were taken over that I still hadn't found yet, so I decided to take my horse on a little walk. And when I say little, I mean we traveled for a couple days. But finally we did find something. It was another village, but this time on top of a mountain. It seemed like when everyone was getting attacked, they came up here and built a little civilization. While they didn't have much loot, in fact most of these barrels were empty, it did make me realize that instead of farming for food, which obviously was taking forever, I could just trade with villagers. Emeralds for food. This would make getting food a ton faster and help me reach my goal of building an army. I made my way back to my base to check on the farm just because I was curious. And yeah, nothing was even really growing at all. I did plant the carrots that I got from the village just in case everything started growing faster, but I didn't count on it. I was tired of my inventory getting full, and I actually remembered that I could craft a backpack. It required some leather, which made me sacrifice a few of my cows, but it was worth it. I then upgraded it to an iron backpack, which made it store more materials. And then I headed back out to the village that my recruit was. Since there was a lot of wood over there, I could get sticks and trade pretty easily. I was sure my horse was tired at this point, so I put him in the stable and let him rest. I needed a couple different kinds of villagers to make this happen. I needed a couple Fletchers that would trade sticks for emeralds, and then I needed farmers that would trade emeralds for food. So I spent the rest of the day gathering the materials and giving the villagers their new occupations. When I woke up on day 54, I had a lot of trees to chop. While I chopped these trees down, I wanted to remind you guys to subscribe. It's free and you can always change your mind if I bore you in the future. And now it's time to trade. I made all the wood into sticks, and then traded the sticks for emeralds. And emeralds to bread. Yeah, this is a lot faster than farming. There is something kind of relaxing about just chopping trees down in Minecraft. These trees had huge roots too. I mean, look at this. This is crazy. So there I went, just chopping trees down and trading for food. Something else that was nice is it was giving me a ton of XP. It was pretty tedious though. Especially because for some reason some villagers just didn't want a job. I thought it might be a good idea too to make an armorer, because I was going to have to equip all of these recruits as well. So I also traded some emeralds for some extra pieces of armor. I was making some really good progress toward my goal of having enough food for all the recruits. But on the end of day 56, a huge storm hit. I took some cover in the tent and went to sleep. I thought that would help, but in the morning the storm was still there, and lightning was striking all around me. The only thing I was actually scared of was a tornado, and since it didn't look like there was any coming, I just continued working. And after a while, it kind of just went away. I finished trading with about 1.5 stacks of emeralds and about 8 stacks of bread. I hoped that would be enough. At this point, I let the villagers go from the dirt cage I had created while I was trading with them. And they seemed happy to be free. I then told my recruit to follow me, saddled up on the horse, and headed back to my base. I sped forward thinking that the recruit would just continue to follow, but when I got home I realized he wasn't there. I waited a couple minutes and he still wasn't there, so I had to go back and find him. It was night by the time I finally found him. He was just taking cover in this tree. I re-instructed him to follow me and took him home. In the morning, just out of curiosity, I checked on my farm. And I wasn't surprised to see that still nothing had really grown. I'm glad I remembered that trading with villagers was a thing. I dropped off the bread in the chest we had made for the recruits, except for 1/2 stack for myself. And then I remembered about the enchanting table we had got from the village we had rescued earlier. This would be essential in upgrading our weapons and tools. So I ran upstairs and began creating an enchanting setup. I decided to just do it in this corner, so I placed down the enchanting table and then the bookshelves. The goal here is to get to level 30, so in order to do that, I had to make more bookshelves. Placing that last one got it to level 30, but it didn't quite look right. Unfortunately, I was out of wood, so I ran downstairs and grabbed some more so I could create the last bookshelf. Yep, that's much better. Finally it was done and I could enchant to level 30. I ran downstairs and grabbed all the diamonds I had, along with the lapis and the anvil. I decided to try and enchant a pickaxe first to Fortune 3. That way I could get a lot more diamonds a lot quicker. My first enchantment turned out to just have silk touch on it. However, I disenchanted it and retried again. This time I got efficiency 4 on breaking 3, which was good, but still no fortune. At this point, I decided to take my last level 30 enchantment and try one last time. This time, I got it. Fortune 3. At this point, I could enchant the rest of my armor and tools, but not to level 30. So I decided to hold off on everything else until I went mining the next day. The next morning, it was raining. As always. I checked out my diet to see that my sugars were again getting pretty low, so I decided to craft another cake. I gathered up all the materials I would need, crafted it, and took it with me to the caves. For whatever reason, I completely missed where the entrance was, but I finally found it and headed down. I forgot I just got rid of my water. The goal here was simple. I was to get as many resources as I possibly could. After all, suiting up an entire army was not going to be cheap. So I gathered up a bunch of iron and coal, and then I was finally hungry enough to eat this entire cake in one sitting. Finally, I got low enough into the cave where I could find some redstone, which I didn't really need, but the XP was helpful. I then came to this huge opening. I didn't see anything dangerous, so I just jumped down and continued to gather resources. I moved carefully around the lava, grabbing some more redstone and iron, but that's when I started to get a little too brave. You see, I was bridging across this lava to try to get to some more iron, and that's when I saw one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I had no idea what this thing was or where it came from, but I quickly got out my crossbow and started shooting it down. Thankfully, there was so much water and lava keeping it away from me that I was able to kill it pretty easily. Although that instilled some serious fear in me, I did not want to run into one of those guys again. It completely changed how this mining trip went. I went from being all brave to now terrified. With good reason. But the horror didn't stop there. What is that? Oh. Okay. Oh no. I'm gonna die. This is it. I'm dead. That was close. My heart is pounding right now. I took the rest of the day to regain my health and mine as far away as I could from whatever those things were. At this point, I only had about a stack and a half of iron, some coal, and some redstone. I was shaking from what just happened, but I was not going to give up this easily. I mined and mined until I finally reached a cave. I finally found some diamonds, but wanted to make sure the coast was clear before I went down to retrieve them. I wasn't taking any chances this time. In total, I now had 13 diamonds, which wasn't as much as I wanted, but honestly at this point I would settle for just about anything. Thankfully, I didn't have to, and found some more diamonds. I had had enough. I was getting out of these caves. When I finally did get up, I saw a tornado forming. I knew I didn't want to be anywhere near it, so I dug down and waited for it to pass. After it finally did, I ran down the mountain and came across a little part of the map I'd never seen before. I wasn't itching to get home yet, so I decided to check it out. I swam across the river and continued forward. As the sun was beginning to set, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It looked to be some sort of guard tower, but I'd check it out in the morning. I was right, and this looked to be full of soldiers. I was met at the door by one of these archers. Some of them just kind of stood there, which I wasn't complaining about. first couple levels weren't that bad, but the loot was pretty much non-existent. These soldiers with bows were really annoying. Now I've got a secret use for these bottles of enchanting. I'll show you later. There was a ton of them up here, but it was just a matter of time until I took them all down. How they're able to hit me through my shield is just beyond me. And not a single barrel up here. Nice. I left just as quickly as I came and continued searching. I took a second to grab these cows because I needed the protein. Nope, and these pigs. And then I stopped for a second to cook it all up. But the only other thing I saw that day was the small campsite we had been to before. I headed back home on day 67 and came across some of the damage that the tornado must have done earlier. When I saw this, I was actually worried about my house and my animals. I ran home, but thankfully they had been left alone. I began smelting and putting away all the valuables that I got from both the cave and the tower I had raided. Since my close call with that weird centipede and whatever the witch thing was, I decided to upgrade my armor to diamond. I also enchanted my sword to sharpness 3, sweeping edge 3. And then I had just enough levels after collecting some iron and gold from the furnaces to enchant my pants to protection 4. Eventually, I'd enchant the rest of my armor, but for now, I just upgraded my sword. Remembering how much I got hit and how much I needed. Before I faced into the other soldiers, I wanted to get unbreaking and mending on my armor and tools. The easiest way to get those enchantments is through trading, so I made some lecterns and headed back to the campsite. The easiest way to do this is to trap a villager, and for whatever reason he stood still while I did it. I had to break and replace this lectern about 20 million times, but he finally got an unbreaking enchantment. Perfect. Now I just needed his friend to give me some mending. Nope. 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 You get the idea. Finally. Now the only thing left to do was to run home to grab some books and lock in the trade with books and emeralds. But I needed a lot more than just one of each. So I went into the forest and started chopping some trees down to get some more emeralds. And I chopped and chopped and chopped until my axe broke. I went back to the village and traded some more emeralds until I could finally get a couple more books. But I think these villagers were kind of tired of sticks because at some point they just kind of stopped trading with me. So I remembered that there was other villagers on top of the snowy mountain and headed that way. I finally got there and let the trading commence. They seemed a little more willing to trade than the other ones were. And after a little while longer here, I exhausted all of my wood supply and headed back. I bought the rest of the mending and unbreaking books I would need, and then spent the night and headed back home in the morning. When I got home, I continued enchanting. I got the best enchantment on my chest plate, but then my boots were a complete waste. And I didn't have any other option except for blast protection on my helmet or fire protection on my boots, so I decided to wait a little bit. I enchanted a crossbow next, which, looking back on it, I probably should have done a bow, but hey, this should be useful too. I also crafted and added this efficiency 3 book to this diamond axe because my last one broke. At this point, I didn't have my helmet or boots enchanted and I really needed them. So I figured the best way to get levels was trading with the villagers. I didn't want to go back down into the caves and there wasn't really any mobs for me to kill. So I went back into the forest and started chopping down trees to trade. After a couple days of cutting down trees, I was done. I made a promise that these were the last trees of this challenge. I went back to the small campsite hoping that these guys wanted some more sticks, but apparently not. So I went back and found my horse and went up to the mountains. Although these guys didn't seem to want to trade very much either. The only other spot I knew that there was villagers was the village that I had saved earlier, so I started heading back there, but that's when I ran into this huge snake. It didn't really seem too interested in me, but I noticed it was starting to follow the horse, and just as I expected, it wrapped around it. Thankfully, I was able to kill it before my horse died. I dug in my backpack and found some golden carrots to regenerate my horse. And that'll have to do for now. I got to the village and thankfully these guys were a lot more willing to trade than the last. In fact, I probably spent way too much time here, because by the time that I left to go home, it was the night of day 79 and we really only had 20 days left here. As soon as I got up on day 80, I enchanted the rest of my armor. I then added all the mending and unbreaking enchantments to my armor and sword. I needed a couple more levels to add mending to my sword, so I'll show you what my plan is with these bottles of enchanting. Mending uses experience levels to heal armor and tools, so watch as I use these bottles of enchanting, my armor restored. which was going to be really useful here in the future. Finally, I felt like I was ready to take on whatever else this world had to offer, and I wasn't going to come home until I knew exactly what needed to be done. On the morning of day 81 is when I saw this knight on top of the hill. As I got up to fight him, I realized there was a huge castle here as well. I wasn't quite ready to take this one on just yet, so I marked the coordinates and retreated. I'd have to bring an army back here. In the meantime, though, I decided to continue exploring. And it didn't take long to see something through the woods. It was another captured village. I was still eager to test out my new armor and weapons, so I began the fight. And yeah, let's just say it was holding up really well. I was taking out these guys way faster with enchanted diamond versus the iron I had before. It helped that they were dumb enough to shoot their own army as well. I was so busy wiping these guys out, I didn't even hear the rain when it came. But it wasn't just rain. It took me a second to realize what was going on, but I was being swept into a tornado. Before I knew it, I was hundreds of blocks in the air being thrown this way and that. My only hope was to get to the lake. There was no way I could clutch it from this high. But before I knew it, I was dropping. Somehow I saved myself. I then ran quickly underground because I did not want to attempt that again. When I woke up on day 84, I couldn't hear the storm anymore, so I headed up, took out these knights, and then took a look at the damage. The tornado obviously left quite the mark on this land. Some villagers had been thrown just like me, but were lucky enough to land in water. I can only assume that we lost quite a few. I spent the next few minutes finishing off the last couple guards, and then freed the villagers. It took me a while to find my horse, but thankfully he did survive the storm and I found him. There was still so much to this world that I hadn't discovered yet, so I headed up this mountain to see if I could see anything. And when I got up here, I found some sort of ruin. I took this guy out and began to explore. There wasn't much loot here, just some bread and building blocks. I did, however, clear some of the snow away and stayed here for the night. When the sun did finally fall, we had these awesome looking northern lights. I figured you guys might enjoy this, so I left it in the video. On day 85, I traveled for pretty much the entire day. I did come across this other small structure, but there wasn't much here either. Well, except for this TNT, which was going to be really useful here in a couple minutes. I spent the last little bit of day 85 just clearing out my inventory and getting ready for what was going to come the next day. Finally, after what seemed like hours of traveling, I came across this castle. This one looked a lot more manageable than the last, so I decided to take it on. I began by shooting the guards I could see from the exterior walls, and for some reason, this guy jumped down and killed himself. Okay. As I got around to the front of the castle, that's where the fun began. I grabbed my flint and steel, and I figured no better time than now than to light it up. As I blew a hole in the opening, I climbed back around and began fighting. There was quite a few of them though, so I decided let's try it again. And boom, I killed a bunch of them. Let's just say over the next couple minutes I got a little too happy with the TNT. It was really effective though. These guys are so annoying. The fight continued all the way into day 87. Thankfully, with my new armor and weapons, these guys weren't really a big deal. After taking out these last couple guards in this room, I thought my job here was done. Although while I was going through the rest of the loot, I remembered there were stairs down below. I followed them down under and discovered more of these guys. I was getting kind of battered, but one by one I managed to take them out. As I headed back down, I got rid of their spawner and then took care of these two. As I opened the iron door below, I discovered a prison full of villagers. Who knows how long these guys have been here, and you couldn't have been in worse living conditions than these guys were. Obviously, I let them all free. And then I allowed them to roam their newly recaptured castle. I collected the resources from the prison since there was just diamonds and gold laying here. I left the castle in good hands and went and found my horse. Although somehow I got turned around and went to the wrong side of the castle, I finally got to him. I continued on my journey until I got to these high cliffs. I wasn't sure how I was going to get my horse over there, but for now I just set up camp here, and that was a problem for tomorrow. I began by trying to just scale the mountain. But my horse took some damage and I realized I had no idea how I was going to get back up the mountain. So I stopped and used some of my old Bed Wars skill to build a bridge. Speed bridging pro. Not really. But it worked. I was able to get my horse over without falling down. And then it was easy, just a matter of climbing. I continued on my travels and found this little baby animal of some sort. I wasn't really sure what it was, so I decided to see if it was hostile when I hit it. Apparently its mom knocked me right onto my horse and I ran. This thing was fast. I managed to make it to the beach and jumped into the water to finally kill it. I feel bad that I had to just take it out like that, but it wasn't going to stop. I found a part of the forest that I hadn't quite explored, so I headed that way. Which, if you've ever rode a horse in Minecraft in water, it can get kind of annoying. Finally, we made it and was free to explore. On the morning of day 91, I came across this little village. Well, I call it a village, but it really was just a house. There were some survivors here though, so I used the villagers to mend my armor. After not too long, everything was repaired and I was on my way. Unfortunately, more exploring got me nowhere today. But on day 92, I came across a huge ruin. I left my horse just in case there was any hostile mobs around and went through the door. I found some diamonds and gold, and then I read this book.
Greetings, traveler. I used to visit the ancient church every day. Its quiet beauty and the soft colored light streaming through the stained glass offered me a solace and peace. It became my refuge, a sanctuary from the turmoil of daily life. One evening, as I was reading in my usual spot, a sudden crash shattered the tranquility. Someone had stormed into our sacred space. Fear gripped my heart as chaos erupted around me. The intruders were ruthless, their presence violating the sanctity of the church.
I knew I didn't have enough time left in this challenge to restore this place, although I wish I did. In fact, speaking of that, if I wanted to grow an army and overtake the main castle, I needed to hurry. I only had a couple days left here and I was far from home. I made the long trek as quickly as I could and finally got home in the middle of the day on day 93. I made sure to give some chicken to the one recruit that I did have, and then I began crafting all the armor and weapons I would need. And since this guy was the first, I upgraded his armor to diamond. Eventually, I got all the weapons and armor I thought we would need and then went to hire some new recruits. I got most of them from this first village we conquered at the beginning of the video. But I had some more emeralds, so I took these guys home and then went to the campsite I traded at. On my way there, I found this guy on a horse and hired him, and then got to the campsite and hired the rest of them. Finally, I had the army I dreamt of. Also, during the last couple days, my hearts on my bar kept growing and retracting. I'm not really sure what was going on there, but I was hoping by the time we got to the castle, I had a bunch of them. I started to give them all food, but realized it was really hard to do when they were all in one spot. So to give them a little more space, I brought them into the pens with the animals. I was then able to single them all out and give them food much easier. After almost a full day of equipping the army, they were ready to go. I wanted to experiment with their commands a little bit, so I told them to raid, and they killed all my livestock. At least I knew they could be aggressive. I then prepared myself. My armor was good to go, and my sword only needed a little bit of XP to repair itself. Perfect. Finally, it was time. I told everyone to follow me and began to head to the castle. Apparently, this guy needed a special invitation. Just a quick travel through the forest and through the river, we were at the footsteps of the castle. We got around to the front and I couldn't contain these guys. They were doing the whole job for me. We were finally ready to face the final boss, Lord Arpheus, the leader of this army. We lost many teammates along the way, but we finally took him down. Just in time too, because on day 99 we finally freed these villagers. I ran around the castle for a minute to make sure we got everyone, and then headed home for the last time. As I got home, I fed my horse and put him in the animal pens. When I got there, I saw this guy. Apparently he missed the memo. Still, I allowed him to wander freely and hung up my armor, which protected me throughout this whole adventure. I then just sat there and watched as the sun set on the 99th day, welcoming in the end of the challenge.